I'm Greg Lee with KTVU Fox 2 in the Bay Area. We are joined by California Attorney General Xavier Becerra. Attorney General, I know you've been very busy, so I appreciate you making the time. Like I said, you've been busy, so I want to kind of start with the most recent, and then we'll kind of work our way backwards. This morning, you were joining with the Alameda County DA to file a lawsuit of price gouging. Can you tell us some details of that case and why it was brought to your attention?
Absolutely, Greg. And I hope folks listen up because we want evidence of folks who are out there scamming and abusing by selling products and services way beyond the price they should. Uh, Today, with Nancy O'Malley, the district attorney of Alameda, we're filing charges against a grocer there in the Alameda County because he was unwilling to reduce his prices, even though he knew, we allege at least, that he knew that he was overcharging for basic staples that you buy at the grocery store. Without being able to explain why prices would go up 10, 20, 40, 50, more than 100% on basic foodstuffs that really are not in short supply. And so we've collected the evidence with the help of a lot of good folks who gave us information and tips, and we filed the action. And we'll do that wherever we have an opportunity.
And I guess that would be my follow-up, sir. Do you anticipate that this is going to start kind of a cascading of these number of types of charges that we see? Because anecdotally, I think across the country, and especially in California, we've heard stories of stores that are price gouging.
Well, Greg, we've received thousands of tips and reports from people throughout the state. We're moving as quickly as we can. Our team is obviously a small team, but we do what we can to try to track down the truth about some of these things. The more people you give us a receipt, you give us a photo on a website of a price of a product, those kinds of things help us. If you just give us information about, well, there was some vendor at some website, it's really tough. But the more that we get some strong leads, the more we can act. And we're working in concert with our colleagues in the district attorney's offices in the 58 counties and with the city attorneys of a lot of our cities to try to get this done.
Last point on that topic, what is the best recourse for people if they feel like they're being price gouged? Is it to reach out to your office, their local district attorney, a tip line, for example?
So there, on my website, we've got all the information people will need, and they can just go on oag.ca.gov, and they'll be able to find the information about price gouging and consumer alerts. We put out a number of consumer alerts. Probably the best piece of advice is buyer beware. Do not assume that people are acting in good faith. Be careful. Second, document. Keep that receipt. Take that photo of the website. Do the things that help you prove beyond your words the wrong that you say you suffered. And then three, please let us know. It's like the mottos in the airports. If you see something, say something. We can't do anything unless we get strong information, and we can't be everywhere in the state. And so we need eyes and ears, and consumers are our eyes and ears.
Perfect. So shifting gears, the Affordable Care Act is a big topic at the Supreme Court right now. You led a coalition of 20 states and DC to defend the ACA. Tell me why the coronavirus has further highlighted this issue for you.
Agreed, that's right. On Wednesday, we filed our legal brief before the Supreme Court to defend the Affordable Care Act, not just for Californians, but for everyone in this country, because the Trump administration decided to walk away from its responsibility in protecting this federal law. And the consequences, well, tens of millions of Americans have insurance through the Affordable Care Act's marketplace exchanges. 133 million Americans receive protections against insurance companies denying them insurance because of a pre-existing medical condition. That would go away if this lawsuit were to dismantle the Affordable Care Act. Seniors, tens of millions of seniors receive no-cost preventative health care as a result of the Affordable Care Act, and they get lower-cost prescription drugs as a result of the Affordable Care Act. That goes away. More than 2 million adult children under the age of 26 have insurance through their parents. That goes away. All of the people who got expanded coverage through Medicaid, what we call Medi-Cal in California, that goes away. And so this is devastating. But it's worse at a time where we're going through this pandemic, where people aren't sure if they're going to have what they need to protect themselves from the virus and from the effects, the consequences, loss of jobs. All those Americans who are losing their jobs are probably losing their employer-sponsored health care as well. You can't get it through the Affordable Care Act. What do you do? And so there could be no worse time than during this pandemic than to tell Americans we're in court, as the Trump administration is, fighting to repeal the Affordable Care Act.
That federal appeals court ruled that individual mandate unconstitutional. Do you see a circumstance, if that's upheld, just that mandate, that you could kind of sever that mandate and keep ACA going?
Well, Greg, two quick arguments. First, kind of strange that the Congress, when it passed this law in December of 2017, providing tax breaks mostly to corporations and very wealthy people, they zeroed out. They took the time. Republicans took the time to zero out the amount of personal responsibility that people would have to pay who didn't sign up for affordable health care through the ACA, the Affordable Care Act. If you didn't do that, you were penalized. So making sure everyone's responsible for health care. If you don't want to buy an insurance policy, then you have to pay a small penalty for not having signed up. The Republicans in this tax bill for tax cuts put in a provision that zeroed out the amount of penalty that people would pay. Somehow the appellate court in Texas held that by zeroing out the amount you have to pay, that meant the entire Affordable Care Act was unconstitutional. So we argue that, one, the appellate court's decision has to be overturned. But two, we argue the point you just made. Okay, so let's say you say that that individual mandate provision, which was zeroed out, is gone, is unconstitutional even. That doesn't mean that the protections against discrimination by insurance companies for pre-existing conditions should go away as well. That doesn't mean young adults, more than 2 million, should no longer be able to get health insurance through their parents. That doesn't mean seniors should no longer be able to purchase prescription drugs at a lower rate. That's all in the Affordable Care Act. The law that was passed in 2017, December 2017, on a tax bill had nothing to do with all those different provisions. So clearly, if we can't win on the argument that the decision by the appellate court was wrong to undermine the individual mandate, clearly the Supreme Court should say that never was it contemplated that we needed to kill the entire Affordable Care Act. They should sever the individual mandate from the other things. But we think we'll win on the appellate court argument that they thought the individual mandate was unconstitutional. We think we have a strong argument to win there, to defend the entire Affordable Care Act.
Yeah. Attorney General, another big topic here, especially in the Bay Area, has to do with the lawsuit, and the big lawsuit that you filed against Uber and Lyft for allegedly misclassifying drivers as independent contractors related to AB5. Again, with coronavirus as the lens, talk about the impact in your purview for these drivers during a time like this.
Well, it's a sad state of affairs when hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of workers, of drivers for companies like Lyft and Uber face the consequences of trying to stay healthy, and also now the consequences of losing their jobs. Worse, when you find out that, unlike other workers in America and certainly in California, you don't get unemployment insurance. You're not entitled to the protections on your wages or any overtime that you may have worked. You don't get those kinds of protections. You don't have Social Security to count on because you didn't pay into Social Security, because Uber and Lyft classified you not as an employee, but as an independent contractor and left it up to you to decide if you wanted to get into the Social Security system. And so all those things, all these Uber and Lyft drivers are finding out because of their so-called independent contractor classification. They're really workers. And we're suing Uber and Lyft because in California, our test to determine if you're truly an independent contractor doing your own work, or you're just doing some contract work for a company, versus an employee who actually works for that company. We're suing Uber and Lyft because we believe it's pretty clear that these drivers are employees and deserve all the protections and rights that workers have. But during this pandemic, that's when it becomes most obvious who loses and how much.
As you know, the argument from Uber and Lyft, or at least some of the drivers, is that you're in effect taking away some of the choices for these drivers. What would be your response to that?
There's nothing in California law, federal law, anywhere, labor law, that says that you cannot provide your employees with certain choices, certain flexibility, whether it's work hours, work days, the type of work. You can provide your employee with any form of flexibility you like. Let me give you a quick example. The California Department of Justice hasn't missed a beat since this coronavirus. We are up and running, but most of our workers are not in our various offices throughout the state. But we're up and running. You were talking about the lawsuit we just filed. I could tell you about a number of other things that we're still doing. We're providing flexibility. Almost all of these folks that are working at the Department of Justice are employees. And so, yeah, absolutely, you can give your employee choice. You can give them flexibility and still classify them as employees. That's a red herring argument.
Sir, another hot topic, again, in the Bay Area, but again, everywhere, the California Consumer Privacy Act, that is a big issue that because of the coronavirus, at least in our state, that has been pushed to July 1st for enforcement. Have you made a decision on moving that date even further because of the pandemic, or are you ready to start taking enforcement despite what some of these businesses are asking you to do?
Well, let's parse that to make sure we're clear. The law took effect on January 1st.
Correct.
It is up and running. People, consumers in California have rights when they use the internet. Companies and those who collect your data, your personal information, have obligations if they're going to collect and store and maybe sell your information. That's up and running. What's coming up soon is the ability for the Department of Justice to enforce the law, to protect consumers. We were given the charge by the legislature in this new law to be the enforcer. And in order to enforce, we've been working to promulgate the regulations that will put in place the architecture for that enforcement. Those regulations are in the process, have not yet been approved by the state. We hope they'll be approved by July 1st. But the law itself says that come July 1st, enforcement can start. And so what we've been telling consumers and businesses throughout this process since last year is get ready. Here's the law. We'll give you some sense of what the law looks like. People have already seen essentially what the regulations are going to look like. They're out there. It's just a matter of now getting them finally tweaked and then approved. And we intend to do everything we can to make sure that we protect people's rights, and we do it in a way that allows those who are in the business of collecting your data do it the right way. And so we're hoping that what we can do is convince people that we'll protect rights and we'll protect innovation. So at least in California, I think it's pretty chew gum.
Yes, sir. Related to the state's response to this pandemic, you know better than anyone that Governor Newsom and the state, and sometimes yourself, have been named in a number of lawsuits related to freedom of assembly, religion, the Second Amendment, and now hair salons who say they want to reopen in this next phase. Tell me your response to those lawsuits and why you believe the state has the authority to take the measures that they certainly have in order to protect safety.
Well, remember that my job as Attorney General at the Department of Justice is to protect people's rights, including, of course, their constitutional rights. And that we will do. We will fight tooth and nail to do that. We've had a Trump administration some 80 times to protect California's legal rights, including our constitutional rights. So we will stand up. At the same time, our constitutional rights, they are rights that recognize reality as well. So, for example, the Supreme Court long ago determined that while we have a right to free speech, none of us has a right to go into a movie theater, a packed movie theater in the dark, and then stand up and start shouting, "Fire, fire, fire." You're going to create a panic and stampede and could end up killing people. And so the Supreme Court says, yeah, you have a right to free speech, but come on, you have to be reasonable. You have to understand the sensibilities of your rights. Right now, we're in a pandemic. If you have the virus and you go out there and don't distance from others, if you start doing things that could make it possible for others to contract the virus, it'll spread. So we have an obligation to protect your, mine, and everyone in California's health, our safety. And so there's where the governor has issued orders which do that. And so for the greater good, he's taken on some monumental tasks and defending any attack governor's emergency orders, and we've succeeded so far in protecting those orders because they are respecting constitutional rights and they are respecting the overall wishes of the Constitution, both federal and state, that we do this protecting we the people.
California Attorney General Xavier Becerra, can't thank you enough for your time, sir. I know you're a very busy man working under these very difficult circumstances, but again, thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you so much.